Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone is well. Give everyone a minute here for the stream to catch up with everyone. And as usual, just on the preliminary chat, which is the chat I'm going to be focusing on during this, on the Slack chat, everyone needs to be on the preliminary Slack chat, needs to have it up, so you can respond if I ask you anything. Also, if you're a new student receiving this empowerment for the first time, congratulations, God bless you. And you need to make sure that you have signed up, that you've actually enrolled yourself into the school, right, which is the $100 preliminary empowerment fee, and then the $25 a month registration. And this will give you access to the articles section of the website as well as your preliminary. So there's two different places you need to be able to access. You need to be able to access the preliminary lectures, which are going to be in the lecture part of the school website. And you need to be able to access, and it would be nice if you can access it during this lecture, the guide to the preliminary empowerment, which is in the articles section of the website. And if you're a enrolled student, you should be able to see the article for instructions on the preliminary cycle. And that is a written booklet, that's a written manual to accompany your practice. And it will answer many questions that you have. And it's ideal if you've already read it, but if not, try to pull it up and take a look at it during breaks. The way that we're going to do this today is we're going to do 3 one-hour-long sessions, and we'll take a 10 or 15-minute break after each hour-long segment. So the whole thing would be 3.5 hours probably, maybe around 3.5 hours to cover everything, to cover all the material. And the way that we do these empowerments are, most of it is pithy instructions, meaning that I am going to be talking to you about some of the essential aspects of our school, especially for those students who are being newly empowered. I know there's a number of students like to hop on and go through it again and watch it again. But for those who are being newly empowered, one of the most important parts of the empowerment is to go over some of the pithy instructions, some of the heart instructions of our lineage, of our school, and introduce you a little more personally to our lineage, since now you are formally joining it. And I congratulate you all on your efforts and on your endeavors for Teleson to approve you and ready you for your preliminary empowerment. So I don't know, I'm sure Teleson sent me a list, but I don't know how many people are actually receiving this for the first time, probably 3 or 4 of you. So so this is your first preliminary empowerment. Could you please make a comment and just kind of say hi so that I learn your name? And just make a little comment in the Slack chat. And good morning, Giuliano and Gigi and Nathan. I hope you all are well. I hope it's not too cold up there, Gigi, up in New York. Okay, so we have Manuel Nunes. Hello, how are you? All the little profile pictures are so tiny on Slack chat. There you are, yeah, the sun's in your eyes, Manuel, for your profile picture. So I hope that you're well. And who's the other fellow here? Dustin Duncan. That's an easy name to remember. And we have a mysterious side profile picture for Dustin Duncan. So if I ever see Dustin's right side of his face in person, I will recognize him. Let's see, is anybody else over here that I'm seeing is online? No, it hasn't been too cold though. It's a little chilly today, but actually this last week was very nice. The weather was very, very good. So it's a pleasure meeting you all and saying hi. And of course, the most important part of any lineage is that we meet in person. So as quickly, as speedily as you are capable of, try to overcome any obstacles necessary to come and spend some time with me in person. Because even though we've developed this online school to try to reach people at a distance and to try to teach people who are eager and not able to travel very well to learn directly, still the importance of in-person instruction from the teacher is essential. Even if it can only happen on rare occasions. The importance is essential because there's an energy to it, there's going to be energy transfer later today, a little bit later this afternoon, to help connect you to the energy of the lineage, but it's even more important to come in person and to see for yourself and to experience it for yourself. So I hope and I pray that I can meet you all in person, and Godspeed on that account. So today, we're going to be talking about the preliminary cycle of education and theurgy as a whole. So first, let's begin with the chants of our lineage, which you will all now have to learn who are being empowered for the first time. You'll have to learn these. And these are in the preliminary cycle booklet that are in the article section of the website. So again, make sure you have access to that. If you don't, you need to talk to Tale-san about it so that he can make sure you have access. The occasional crackle and pop over here is just a fire going on, so don't mind it. So one of the most important chants, one of the most important hymns that we do in our school, and every hymn that we do that is a canonical part of our practices, meaning if there's any chant or hymn that we do that we are asking all of our students to do, I have made sure that it is a non-sectarian, as universal a hymn as possible, so that somebody who's unaffiliated feels comfortable with it, somebody who is affiliated with a religion feels comfortable with it, a Buddhist, a Sufi, a Jew, a Christian, can all be comfortable with these, because these are old Gnostic terms and old Egyptian and Greco-Egyptian terms that aren't really in use anymore in terms of any kind of functional ecclesiastical life. So the first hymn that we do is the hymn of the vows, and there's several different levels to the hymn of the vows, but the one that exists for the sake of the school for our preliminary practice is chanting Iao. And so when we chant Iao, and we'll go over this again later this evening, but I like to chant it at the beginning of lectures and even at the end of lectures, because it helps us all connect. We're all chanting the same thing. We're all hymning together. We're hymning this because Iao, the old Egyptians, the names of the gods in the old Greco-Egyptian and the old Mediterranean mystery schools were always different permutations of vowels, different arrangements of the vowels, because the vowels are seen as these formless things, right? The vowels, all the old languages don't even write in the vowels. You only write the consonants because the vowels are seen as being too sublime to write into the letter of the text. So in the Platonic aspect, and Platonic philosophy is going to play a large part in your life moving forward in the school, if you find that the school in its way is important to you. But in this way of looking at things, the vowels represent the ideas, the incorporeal world. They don't have a form, but they give essence to everything. You can't hear the consonant without the vowel. The consonant has no meaning without the vowels. So the vowels weave together the consonants, and this is like spirit and soul weaving together matter. So we can see the vowels as being like the soul of the thing, the essence of it, and the consonants as being the form of it. So the gods are totally formless, and by gods I mean these primeval archetypes, whether we call them names of gods, or we call them gods, or we call them archangels, whatever we wish to say. These fundamental divine realities are utterly incorporeal, and so therefore the vowels are most like them, and language itself is most like them. Right? Because I'm talking to you now, but you can't see it. You can see my lips moving. You can see the form that the language is taking, but nobody can point and grab the word that I'm saying and throw it someplace else. Nobody can capture it in a bottle and open it up and listen to it later. And this is because language is a unique thing. Language is the middle place between our world and the next, between the unseen and the seen. because it seems corporeal. We're all speaking about it. We're all speaking in a corporeal world. Yet we can't see it. We can't grab it. It has a kind of incorporeal power. That's difficult to explain. When I can tell somebody sit and they sit and nothing happened. Nothing happened corporeally. Yet an idea was transferred. An idea was communicated. Something incorporeal was communicated in a way that was almost corporeal. Words are almost corporeal. When we write them down, now they're corporeal. And then they last for very long periods of time, depending on what we wrote them on. If we write them on water, they make no effect. If we carve them in stone, they last a long time. We still find them carved in stone. So words are very interesting things. Therefore, mantras, the science of sacred language, the Indians call it mantra shastra. We call it legomena. There's legomena and dromena. And you're going to pick up some Greek in this school. Not because I necessarily think that everybody needs to learn Greek, but because Greek is a profound language. And English is not, though English has become more profound over time. But Greek allows, the Greek language allows for a subtlety in language that English doesn't have. There's some old languages like Greek and Sanskrit are very profound. So we say legomena and dromena. Legomena means the things spoken, and this refers to the things spoken in religious rites and spiritual ceremonies. This means the mantras, the sacred chants and hymns. Dromena means the things performed. These two things form the basis of really theurgy, of the spiritual path. That when we're engaged in spiritual activity, either we're doing legomena, we're chanting, and legomena even refers to the lectures, like a lecture like this in a temple. If it was happening in a temple after a ceremony, and I'm just giving pity instructions to my students and we're sitting around, then we say this is a kind of legomena. This is a kind of sacred discourse happening. And a sacred discourse can happen between a teacher and his students. A sacred discourse can happen between you and the gods. A sacred discourse can happen just chanting sacred names and trying to connect to the divine. So we're engaging in a legomena when we do our chants. Dromena are the things performed. This means the energy circulations you perform, the breathing practices that you do, the offerings that you make, the incantations and rituals that you engage in. This forms an important part of theurgy that we'll talk about in a little bit, this concept of divine activity, which is the best understanding of the word itself and what it means. And my hope at the end of this empowerment is not that you understand the preliminary cycle teachings, right? That would take days to go over. There's many lectures. My hope is that you have a better understanding of theurgy itself at the end of our empowerment today, and that you receive your first set of practices called the preliminary cycle, which will allow you to begin to experientially gain an understanding of theurgy. So today you're going to gain a theoretical understanding, hopefully, a heart-inspired theoretical understanding of theurgy and its philosophy and its way of life. And then I'm going to pound you with energy at the end of the day. I'm going to fill you with some of the energy of the lineage. If you're sensitive enough to me and you can connect to me, then you'll experience it directly. That'll be undeniable. And then that'll give you more of an experiential understanding of the lineage. But then you'll also receive the practices, and the practices will help you directly yourself gain an understanding of this lineage and its practices. So let us begin. We're going to chant the hymn of the vowels. The three vowels are E, A, O. These three vowels, this is the theurgic trinity. Yao. This is an old name of God. And the reason why it's important is because all classical 7 vowels are said when you chant Yao. The range of motion of the mouth is such that we actually say all 7 vowels while we say these 3. Now when we do the chant, we're connecting to different levels of reality. E represents this very high, profound initiatic current. A represents the sustaining power of the universe. O represents the material world, the divine influx into this world. So each of the individual vowels have a certain power over them, and we chant them a lot. We say Yao a lot in the school because these 3 vowels have a tonifying effect on your nervous system, on your brain. They regulate your energy flow, and they work on 3 specific centers. So maybe you're familiar with the chakra system of Tibet and of India, and in China they have the Dians, the Dantians. So this is kind of more similar to the three Dantians. In our system, Plato in the sixth book of the Republic says that the soul is arranged into three parts. And we arrange these three parts into the nous, which is here at the top of the head, the thumos, which is in the heart, and the epithumia, which is behind the navel. And these respectively govern our intellect, our divine mind, and our reasoning. And then our passions and drives in the heart, which is the thumos. And then our appetites and habits, which is behind the navel. Those are all of our animal-like characteristics. These are our human characteristics, and these are our divine characteristics. You'll learn much more about that as you progress through the school. But the point of mentioning it now is that iao, E is here, A is here, O is behind the navel. And you can even, while we chant, bring your mind to those places as well. These vowel intonations have a natural resonance with these parts of you. And they naturally activate the energies here. So I've written at this a little bit at length if you read the booklet on the preliminary cycle. So please read it, and you'll see I go into great detail on the importance of this chant and the chant which follows. So we'll chant the Yao together, and sitting there at your computer, please chant this with me. It's important that we all chant this together so that I can connect to all of you energetically. I'd like to connect to you before we begin the teachings. And then we always do the opening prayer, and this prayer comes from an old text called the Bacchae by the playwright Euripides, and it's said by the chorus, and we don't say the entire chorus, we say the first 4 lines of the chorus, which has a very profound meaning, and essentially is a praise to the masters, the spiritual masters. Blessed are those who are pure spirit, who have received initiation into the masters, whose food, whose life are the rites of the gods, right, the sacred mysteries, and whose souls are initiated. So we call this prayer the Makar Hostes, which just means blessed are those. Makar Hostes Uraimon, Deletas Deaneros, Myotanagestue Kai, Deasue Ataip Sukan. And I'll go over the details of this more. I'll go over the details of this more later today when we go over the preliminary cycle. I'll talk a little bit more about that chant as well and its importance in our practice. So these are just chants we do to connect to the stream of the lineage. So now that we're connected and we're speaking, and I would ask generally, there will be a time for questions at the end. Right? There'll be a time for questions at the end of the day. Generally, once I get talking, I don't stop, and so any attempt to ask a question will be quite futile until I decide that I'll take a look at the chat again and answer questions. So let's talk about theurgy, the path which you're embarking on. We call a path a horos. Horos in Greek means a way. I am called a Daskalodos. Daskalodos is a combination of Daskalos and horos. Daskalos means teacher. Horos means the way. So I'm called a Daskalodos, teacher of the way. Theurgy means divine activity. It comes from the word thea and energeia. Right? Thea means divine or God, and energeia means works. So divine works, divine activities, divine energy. These are all godlike energies. These are all ways to interpret theurgy. And the way that the classical theurgists understood this is that through a combination of meditative and contemplative training, a philosophical way of life, and definite spiritual exercises, we can gain an enlightenment about us. We can realize essential reality. We can realize the essential nature of our souls as divine things. And through the divinity inherent in our souls, we can recognize divinity itself. That our souls are divine because something else is infinitely more divine. We have life because something else has infinitely more life. We have existence because something else exists much more perfectly than us. We have divinity because there is something so infinitely divine that it can produce a seemingly infinite number of divine things and not lose any of its own divinity. So whether you call this thing God, or you call it the Tao, Plato calls it the good. And this is a phrase that you'll hear me use. This is a name you'll hear me use a lot. The good and the one. These are both names that Plato assigns to God. We use Plato's philosophy a lot in this school. And the influence, even the word theurgy, is largely coined and put into practice by followers of Plato in the early first millennia, second, third, and fourth centuries, into the fifth and sixth centuries even. A group of people called the Neoplatonists, or later Platonists. And these were all heavily engaged in ritual magic and spiritual practices, as well as study and contemplation of the realities taught by Plato. And the essential teachings of Plato, of which we are far beyond our scope for today's discussion. But essentially, they're teachings that are very familiar to all of us now. They mean that the soul is immortal. It does not pass away with the passing of your body. They mean that there is something incorporeal, which is the cause of all corporeal things. There's something formless that is the cause of all form. And that causes are necessarily greater than that which they cause. And they're simpler. This is an important aspect of Platonic theology. And so by simplifying ourselves, by making ourselves more like that which we wish to become divine. We wish to awaken our own inner divinity. So therefore, to become more like those beings, those realities, which themselves are utterly divine in and of themselves, we ourselves must, through a kind of divine mimesis, a kind of divine imitation, we ourselves must become more divine. This means purifying our activities. If there's anything in us that is bestial, that is like an animal, in habits, in desires, in personal satisfactions that we try to gain, any kind of sensual indulgences, if there are things about us that are like animals, we have to purge ourselves of them. And be as human as we can, because a human is seen as something that is naturally blessed with divinity, because it has reason. And so engaging our intellect, engaging our reasoning faculties, we gradually awaken more to the divinity of the soul. A human can recognize the soul and can recognize their own soul. So by purging ourselves of lesser things and cultivating virtue instead of vice. And through living these things we call living a philosophical life. Right? Living a life full of meaning, meaning you don't do things like an animal. You don't do things like a brute. You don't do things without thinking. You don't do things without a reason or a purpose. And when you do something when there is a purpose to be had, you work hard to make sure that the purpose is the best purpose that there could be, and that the activity is being done the best way that you can do. The essence of living a philosophical life, which has to attend to your theurgic practices. I promise you right now, if you practice 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day, you will achieve nothing if your way of life is not that of a philosopher. If your way of life is not full of meaning. Sure, you'll gain some little magic powers, and everybody will think that that's quite cool and nifty. Right? Maybe you can move something, maybe you know some things before they happen. Maybe you can control the weather, or perform some other simple phenomena, astral project. All these things which are like child play to a real philosopher, and child play to a real theurgist. Sure, but you'll get caught in that realm. You'll be what we call a sorcerer, not a theurgist. There'll be no wisdom in what you practice. Philosophy is how we endow our life with wisdom. And as we ourselves become more filled with that wisdom, And we live a life that is more like the life of the gods and less like the life of man. And we think in a way that is more like that of the gods and less like that of people. Then gradually we become less like people, less like a mortal human, and more like an immortal God. This is the essential philosophy of how we should conduct ourselves. And today we'll be focusing more on things like this, pith instructions. My hope is that you understand some of the essential aspects of the system, even if nothing in particular, which there are many lectures for you to read now, many lectures in the preliminary cycle, for you to read over and over again, that will teach you the particulars. So by living a philosophical way of life, purifying ourselves of what one of our great masters, Proclus, what he says are rational views of life, or rational notions of life. Many systems talk about reincarnation, they talk about liberation from reincarnation, but I don't find their explanations of reincarnation very satisfactory. To me, I think the best way of viewing reincarnation is that you will naturally become that which you are. You'll come back as what you are. If you're the kind of thing that loves to eat and drink and needs to be here in order to fulfill those things, then you're going to come back and you're going to eat and drink. If that's where your heart is, if your heart is with your food and your sex and your sleep, then you're going to keep coming back and having food and sex and sleep. If your heart is with something higher, right, maybe it's more focused on a religious life or austerity, then you're going to keep coming back and living those kinds of lives. If your heart is something that cannot, if your heart is set on something that cannot be satisfied in this world, then you're not going to come back to this world. If your heart is set, if you're living a divine mode of life, then when this body passes away, you'll continue to live a divine mode of life. And there'll be no reason to take a body again. A body would be an impediment to that. But if you're living an animal kind of life, then you're going to keep coming back and living an animal life. So wherever you are, that's your reality. That's your station. And that's going to continue to be your reality time and time again. If you're the kind of thing that has to reincarnate because you're the kind of thing that likes to do things that require a body, then you're going to keep coming back and reincarnating over and over and over. It doesn't matter how much you practice each day. So your way of life has to be pure. Because your practices will help you a lot. But you're going to be in a tricky situation. Even if you practice 6 hours a day, that's 18 hours a day that you're not practicing. Right? 18 hours a day that you're not practicing. So even in the face of that 6 hours, it's not so much. Now, if you're meditating 14, 15 hours a day, well, there's no time to live a way of life. You're just meditating all the time. And you'll see that generally in our school, that's not recommended. I think that you're much safer if you can learn to be safe in the world. If you can learn to be safe, crawling away into a cave or something, then you're really not safe because you require a very exact set of conditions. If you can be happy and still be in the world, if you can live a virtuous life surrounded by vice, if you can live a happy life surrounded by sorrow and suffering, if you can live a divine life, an immortal life surrounded by mortal needs and desires, then now this is a truly liberated person, isn't it? This is a truly free person. Somebody who is hiding from their chains, escaping from their chains. It's not the same as someone who's been liberated from their chains. A runaway slave is not the same as a free man. And you have to remember this. Don't be a runaway slave in your practices, in your way of life. Really liberate yourself, become free from the things that shackle you and bind your soul. So gradually, the spiritual path is about learning who you really are. Because that is who you are. What you have recognized yourself to be, what the reality is of that is what you are. If you recognize yourself to be something that eats and sleeps and drinks, you're going to keep coming back as something that eats and sleeps and drinks. And you'll find that at first, even though you can have an idea of yourself as something more divine, that's different than a realization. Our term for some of these things, we have some specific terms for these things. Okay. So for example, in English, we say knowledge. Well, we can say a few different things in Greek. We can say pronoia, which is a concept of wisdom. We can say Sophia, which is wisdom as a deity, wisdom as a divine reality. We can say episteme, which is like book knowledge, learning knowledge, the knowledge of a trait. For example, one may have episteme of how to make tea, right? One may have episteme of how to make clothes. We have doxa, which is opinion. We have dianoia, which is informed opinion. We have gnosis, which is knowledge. Now, gnosis is a loaded term. This is a word you're going to hear a lot. Gnosis. This means knowledge, an eternal kind of knowledge. This is Plato's kind of knowledge. We mean an eternal, immutable kind of knowledge. That's what we're trying to gain. That's the knowledge we're trying to recognize. And the first step on the ladder of that knowledge is trying to learn about ourselves. What am I? What am I and what am I not? Who am I and who am I not? And why do I think I'm these things? Do I only think I'm these things because I was born in this place at this time in these conditions? What is my real nature? And you'll find that there'll be like blocks, there'll be doors, there'll be walls in the ways of your questions, like you're talking to a wall. And so the way that we break through these walls is through something we call ascesis. Ascesis means spiritual practice. Ascesis means spiritual practice. It is the same Greek word as ascetikos, which is where we get our word ascetic from, somebody who's renounced the world, somebody who puts themselves through intense practices. Well, for us, we're all ascetics because we're trying to learn how to renounce the world in our hearts. We're trying to learn how to renounce this world for a more divine world. And so therefore, that's a real ascetic. A real ascetic is someone who engages in ascesis. Ascesis is divine practice. Right? Ascesis is how you become a theurgist. Ascesis is how you recognize your divinity. So this is really what an ascetic is. An ascetic is somebody who's dead to this world. An ascetic is not somebody who has to go hide from this world, like a runaway slave. An ascetic is a free man. An ascetic is a real person. The Navajo say this, be a real person. So do the Taoists. It's interesting they have the same term. The real person, the real human being, an authentic human being, utterly itself, utterly a soul, utterly divine. These things, this is what we're going to try to slowly cognize, slowly recognize. Now there's different ways to come to these realizations, and gnosis of the self, healton of the self, gnosis of yourself, knowledge of what you really are, even that is not actually a telos, it's not actually an end in and of itself. That's actually, in a sense, the beginning. It's the end of one phase of life. It's the beginning of another phase of life. So right now you're in the phase of trying to recognize yourself. Gain gnosis, healton, gnosis of the self. Then having recognized your own innate nature and living from that place, we call this a metanoia, meaning a total change of mind. Metanoia is like a transformation, a total transformation of the self that occurs based on knowledge, right? So this is different than learning how to drive a car. You are not a different person because you know how to drive a car. That's episteme. But you are a different person when you recognize what the person is, when you recognize your own innate self. This is called a metanoia, a change of realization, a change of view. The Buddhists talk about the view and the ground, right? The view and the path. This is kind of a similar concept, the change of view that we have, a metanoia, a transformation in the essential way that we think and conceive of things. Now there's many metanoia. There may even be thousands of metanoia if we wanted to line them all up like a scientist with a microscope and divide every single little thing. But gnosis is the first large metanoia. This is the seeing yourself as an immortal soul instead of as a perishable and temporal body. And not just having thoughts of yourself, not imagining yourself. Imagination is a different thing, right? That's where our word fantasy or phantasma comes from. In English, it's from the Greek word phantasmos, which means, or fantasia, it's like a fantasy and imagination. That's a function of the mind. We're not talking about that. Don't delude yourself into having an imagination of gnosis. That is not gnosis, it's ignorance. So in the Gnostic state, we have a real apprehension where we actually directly see, we apprehend our divine state. We apprehend our immortal soul. And we function as though we ourselves, we think, we experience the world from that place as much as possible. You'll experience it more when you're in a meditative state because in meditation you can close everything off and come in. But gradually you'll learn how to even integrate it into your daily activities, into your daily way of thinking and interacting with things. But you'll find that there's many walls in the way, there's many blocks and obstacles. And so because of this, we have what we call ascesis. Ascesis is a systematic, a scientific way of developing yourself spiritually, so that gradually these blocks remove themselves. So here's the interesting thing about ascesis. You don't need ascesis, but you do. Philosophically, there's no reason you need ascesis. Philosophically, just at the level of mind, you can realize the nature of yourself just by contemplation, just by what we call dialectic, which is a kind of mental exercise to purify your mind and recognize your own innate nature. This is more like the Dzogchen kind of view, or Advaita in Vedantic terms. But practically speaking, there are many, many obstacles to your ability to do this, or else you would have done it already. So there must be karmic impediments and obstacles to your ability to recognize what you really are. Almost like a kind of sickness that's come over the soul and made it forget its real nature. And so ascesis means a systematic way of purifying yourself, like a treatment course. Like if you go to a doctor, he prescribes a routine of treatment, and that you need to eat like this, and you need to sleep like this, and you need to get some sunlight each day, and you need to take these herbs, and you need to avoid these kinds of foods, and you need to have limited sexual activity. And a doctor may give you, a good doctor may give you a whole range of activities that you need to engage in step by step by step in order to recover your health. And so in this sense, now I'm the doctor, and hopefully a good doctor for your souls. And I will be prescribing to you a course of medicine, a course of diet, a course of life that will gradually help purify the sickness from the soul, so it learns to see again, it regains the light in its eyes, and it can see the divine light as a result. So this is what ascesis is. Ascesis is the treatment routine for your soul, purifying it. And one of the things that has happened is your energy is all knotted up. Okay, it's like this. It's running all over the place, on either side of the spine, and it's blocked, running through the arms, running through the legs, running through the organs. And it's very difficult in today's world. Your energy has become very disturbed because your energy is being bombarded by radiation constantly. It's being bombarded by the satellites. It's being bombarded by your Wi-Fi. It's being bombarded by your phone and the radiation coming off your phone, right? Have you seen the things where they take a phone and they put it in there with a bunch of, try to sprout a bunch of seeds, and the seeds won't even grow. In fact, the seeds start to rot. But if you put a little bit of water in there without the phone, the seeds grow just fine. You put water in there with the phone, and they're destroyed. So your cells are already been bombarded more than any person 100 years ago. If you had come to the mysteries 100 years ago, you would have grown up eating fresh food, real food, from real things that weren't, biologically treated and manipulated, with all the nutrients that they needed. Your brain be healthier, your organs be healthier, your body be healthier, which means your mind would be healthier too. And even then, even back then, spiritual practice was important. Ascesis was important. Even then, many people had many obstacles that kept them from realizing their own innate nature. So how much more important is it now? It's almost indescribably more important that we engage in systematic practices to purify ourselves. One of the things that has happened is our energy is very disturbed. We have an energetic body. Right? Just like how we say, oh, Mother Nature. Well, there's a Mother Nature in our body. There's a Mother Nature in the world that controls and regulates the seasons and the seeds and the plants and the animals. There's a Mother Nature in our body too. It's our energy system. We have a complex flow of energy through different meridians, or metus, we call them. Different meridians and spheroid, chakras, energy centers. And due to our habits, due to our activities, due to our way of thinking, due to our way of eating, due to our way of drinking, due to how much sunlight we get, due to many, many things, this energy is either supported or it's detrimented. Either it's encouraged or it's blocked up. So through specific practices, we work on untying the knots of energy in our body, especially in the spine and the breath and our energy flow through the organs. We gradually work on untying these. And we see that there's a number of veils, there's a number of walls between us and where we're trying to go. Some of these are inside of us, some of them are even external. And you learn much more about that later in the school, that even though we have internal blockages we have to go through to recognize our own self, well, once we've recognized our own self, now we need to recognize God. Now there's even more veils to go between recognizing the divinity in our soul and recognizing divinity itself. experiencing divinity itself, making contact with it. So these are different levels. One is called the path of gnosis, achieving knowledge of the self. The other is called the path of henosis, which means the path of knowledge of the one, knowledge of the good. Also called a theophany, right? The vision of God, which is at the height of theurgy. And we'll talk about that more, probably in an hour or two. But we'll talk a little bit, maybe even after our break here in a minute. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the classical aims of theurgy, so that you can know a little bit more about where you are and what you're engaged in by learning more about what our aims are and what separates theurgy from other systems. Because in order to be a system, there has to be some things peculiar to that way, right? Otherwise, there's no point. You should just learn something else. So any system will have its own methodology, its own terminology and semantics. It'll have its own approach and its own particular results that it's trying to gain. But where you will help yourself immensely. And I'll tell you two things, one in your body and one in your mind. And you have to do both of these. Right? And if you do these, you'll make progress. You'll make success. You'll have success. If you don't do these, it doesn't really matter how much you practice. The first of these is learning to control your way of life. Your way of life cannot be an impediment to your spiritual path. Your way of life cannot be an impediment to your happiness and to your peace. The way many of us live, we're adding suffering to the world. We're not creating more peace. First, we have to be at peace in ourselves, and then we can create peace outside of us. So, in this way, we have to try to live a life conducive to peace and to happiness. That doesn't mean you don't get angry. Of course you can get angry. There's many divine masters who can get angry. Some of my masters can get quite angry. It means that none of those things come from a selfish place. It means that we try to live in harmony. We try to have a life philosophy. We try to have a way of life. Instead of just living, just getting by, just eating, sleeping, drinking, having sex, needing protection and shelter. These are all the things the animals do. We need to live a rational life, philosophical life. Our diet should make sense for our spiritual path. Our relationships should make sense for our spiritual path and for our realization. Our way of life, our daily activities should make sense. So applying your mind to your way of life is important. Developing a way of life. This is something that's been lost in this culture. This is something almost the whole world is having a crisis of it's a way of life crisis. And in some ways it's good because it has allowed many different spiritual systems and teachers to rise up instead of and being able to kind of break free of some of the religious entrapments, because people aren't connecting to the religious ways of life, so they want to, but they still yearn for a way of life. However, it's been quite difficult because depression has never been so high. Crime is very hard. Drug abuse is rampant. Depression is very high. Suicides have never been higher. And this is because human beings need a way of life. So live meaningfully. Develop a way of life, develop a routine, develop a reason for why you sleep when you sleep and how long you sleep, for why you eat what you eat and how much you eat, for why you do what you do and how much you do. Apply your mind to your way of life. Don't just go through like an automaton through life and then you're dead. That's no way. That's no way. And there's no happiness or peace there. That's like a dream, like ignorance. So instead, apply yourself to your way of life. Second thing is question all of your beliefs. This is very important, but this is much more profound, and this takes a long time. You can develop a good way of life in a few months. What is it? They say 90 days you can develop any new habit, right? Isn't it 90 days? 60 days?
Yeah, 66 is exactly the number.
Okay, apparently 66 is the exact number of days. 66 days, you can develop any new habit, okay? So that part is easy. In 2-3 months, your way of life can be completely conducive to your spiritual path, so that you can make progress every day just by living. But your mind, now that's a whole other thing. That can take years and years and years. You have to question your beliefs. You have to question your opinions. Something you'll learn is that Plato considers opinions to be the cause of all of our woes. Because we have the more opinions about something that we know the least about. If there's a piece of knowledge that everybody agrees on because it's true, and so therefore there's no point in arguing about it, right? Then there's no opinions about that. This is one unified knowledge, because that's what knowledge does. It unifies. It takes things that are divided and it brings them together to one point. However, opinion can be as manifold as the grains of sand on the beach. And where there is the utter lack of knowledge about something, there's an utter surplus, an utter plethora of opinion. And the problem with opinion is that the very nature of opinion is that you don't know it. And so therefore you're guessing. Now, of course, there's educated guesses and there's uneducated guesses. But knowledge is a unifying thing. Opinion is something that divides. So you need to vigorously attack your opinions on things. Even your opinions as to why you're here, what you want out of the spiritual path. Attack your opinions about what you think the right way of life is. Attack your opinions about your concepts of other people, your concepts of other things. You need to be engaged in this. I always say that a good theologist and a good philosopher, which you'll come to learn to me, mean the same thing. Remember this. If you have a piece of pen and paper, write it down, right? If you're new to this. Some of you guys have heard this plenty of times, but if you're new to this, write this down. Theurgy is practical philosophy, and philosophy is theoretical theurgy. These two things go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. Philosophy is much more, though our modern use of the word is not how Plato and Pythagoras meant it. Pythagoras is said to have coined the term philosophy, lover of wisdom. A lover of wisdom is someone who seeks wisdom everywhere. Someone who tries to live with wisdom. Someone who acts with wisdom. Someone who tries to think with wisdom. Someone who seeks out wisdom. And that requires acknowledging your own ignorance. Otherwise, you would never seek it out. So let's all be lovers of wisdom and doers of divine things. Then we will be philosophers and theologians together, united into one person. So we'll take a short break here for 10 or 15 minutes. I like to take these breaks because otherwise I'll talk straight through for 3 or 4 hours, but then my voice will be bothering me a little bit later. So this is better, I think, for everybody. You guys can stretch out a little bit and think about, try to recall a little bit what was just said. Otherwise, you forget it and you lose it. Even though this will be recorded, don't rely on technology. Everyone's brains are weak because everyone relies on technology for everything. No one can remember a phone number. No one can remember even how to drive anywhere because of GPS. So even when people read books, they don't remember anything they read anymore. Okay, so just sit there for a minute, recall the major salient points of the last hour. Stretch a little bit. Get yourself a little snack or something. I'll be back in about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so don't close down this feed. The feed itself isn't closing, it's just the sound in the video is turning off. Okay. God bless, and as you'll hear us say oftentimes, when we say hello or goodbye to each other in this path, we often say be victorious. And we say that because the spiritual path is a struggle. The spiritual path is difficult, it's a trial, it's an activity like going through the labors of Hercules. And so we always tell each other, be victorious. And whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, be victorious. God bless. I'll be back with you in a few moments. Okay, so we're back now. So now we'll talk about some of the operative aspects of theurgy, particularly what you're going to be learning, what you can expect to learn, and kind of giving you a broad outline of the path. You're beginning with your initial training, which is the preliminary cycle, and you're going to receive that after the next break. The preliminary cycle is a series of purifications meant to help open you up internally and externally, both to your own inner reality and to outer reality. Then you're going to embark on a rather long period, depending on how much you practice and how well your life is. A rather long period of education combined with what we call internal alchemy. Internal alchemy plays an important role in our school, and it is one of the major areas where the theurgy that you are learning differs from the theurgy of some of the classical theurgists. To our knowledge, the classical Mediterranean theurgists at the time of Iamblichus, Proclus, Damascius, Isidore, others, at that time, to our knowledge, they did not have a complex internal system of development in terms of breath work and moving energy in certain ways. We see in some of the papers that have come down and some of the ritual texts that have come down, we do see that there was a semblance of breath work, of holding the breath and saying certain vowels and intonations, looking certain directions. Okay. So there was some control of internal energy, but it was not quite as refined and sophisticated as we see in places like southern India and in China, especially northern China through the Chuanzhen sect, the true reality school of Taoism. So these are some of the initiatic currents, some of the initiatic lines that come through into this lineage, into this school. My brother and I, who formulated the bulk of these teachings, have received initiations into several different Sufi lineages. We've received initiation into Longmin Taoism, into the offshoot Mopai Taoism, into Maoshan Taoism, Shangqin. We've received initiation empowerment into several different forms and traditions of yoga, and through the Nath yogis of the Northern Himalayas. We've received initiation into Nyingma Buddhism, Kagyu Buddhism. There's a number of different lines that have come through, as well as into Mongolian shamanism and a few others. And so some of these teachings, we picked some things that we felt like were very, very beneficial to practitioners of theurgy. And one of the things that I felt that classical theurgy, in a sense, was lacking, that some other systems had developed very well, was their theories of internal alchemy, of transmuting your internal energetic environment to better represent the universe. Now, the theory for this is well grounded in theurgy and in philosophy, because Iamblichus, in his defense of theurgy, his famous treatise, says that the soul should be arranged so that it's an inner suntamana, meaning it's an inner image of the universe. So the soul's state represents a perfect elevation of the universe, so that you can connect to the elevated aspects of the universe, so that you become divine inwardly and divine outwardly. So philosophically, it's very sound, but some of the classical theurgists lack the techniques for it. So we've included these techniques, and Ramos and I felt from the onset that for ritual work to be effective in this day and age, for theurgy to be effective in this day and age, we need to awaken some aspects of our internal power. We need to awaken some aspects of our internal energy through breath work, through specific practices and visualizations and repetitions of certain sacred chants and mantras, through moving energy through certain circuits in our body. We need to gradually awaken some of the inner power that's stored in us, that is lying dormant in most people now. And in awakening this, certain even physiological changes will happen, psychological changes will happen, psychosomatic changes will happen, and somatic changes, purely physical changes will occur. They're not going to go too into the details of. You'll learn, especially in level 1 empowerment, we'll talk more about the internal alchemy. Because when you enter into level 1, that's where the internal alchemical training really kicks in. Level 1, 2, and 3, there's a lot of internal alchemy. This means that there will be less ritual, less magical training, and more mystical and internal training, internal alchemy, and the part of the school that you all are in, which we call the outer school. TDS, we call the outer school. The divine science is the outer school. After your internal energy has been rectified to a certain extent, certain abilities have developed more clearly in you, such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, astral projection, mental projection, things of this sort. The minds become much calmer. Some of the internal knots of energy that we were talking about have been untied, so that your mind is open to some higher realities much easier. Then we'll begin inducting you into the theurgic rites and practices, fire rituals, offerings, incantations, things that are used to help begin taking some of the hard work you've been doing internally and projecting it externally into the universe. And that part of your training we call building the bridge. Building the bridge, the Navajo call it building the rainbow bridge or walking the rainbow bridge. It means establishing the connection between your world and the spirit world, opening up your heart to the divine, opening up yourself to your divine self and to realities outside of you. And that's where some very interesting things begin happening, right? That's where different beings begin visiting you, and you begin to develop a more concrete understanding of the universe that you live in and how densely populated it is with things that you cannot see normally. You begin to become introduced to that world later on through theurgic rites and practices. So through focusing more on the alchemy now, your ritual later will be much more effective. Your prayers will be more effective. Your contemplations will be more effective. Your health will be better. Your longevity will be better. If you have some health issues, many of those will gradually resolve themselves over time. And then when you're ready, after you've of course passed the test, then you receive empowerment or initiation into the inner school. The inner school means, the techniques in the outer school are techniques that some of them were influenced by other traditions, but largely they were revelations to Ramos and I. That means spiritual beings came to us in a dream state or in a waking state, and they gave us certain practices. And they used to tell us where this practice goes in relation to the rest of the practices by saying, oh, teach this to so-and-so, or teach this to this person, teach this to that person. And we would know what level that person was at. And so that would help us understand where that practice goes in the training. And so over the course of several years, a series of practices called the Olympian practices, which is a set of 7 practices that are done in succession, one at a time. These practices gradually became revealed to Ramos and I, and those form the basis, that's the skeletal part, that's the structure of the internal alchemy training of the outer school. Once you graduate to the inner school, now I give you my secrets. Once I put you into the inner school, now I'm giving you things that my masters, precious teachings that my masters gave me, that their masters gave them, that their masters gave them. You'll be doing practices that have been done for thousands of years. You'll be doing practices that have generated the enlightened state for thousands of years. So at that point, though, of course, it's difficult to reach that point because you're learning some very serious things. And you see, the universe will test you, and God will test you and test your resolve. And I may test you occasionally as well. And if you do well and you practice hard and you have good faith and due diligence, then naturally realization will begin to dawn. Initiation will happen just as naturally as enlightenment. And you can begin receiving more of the traditional theurgic rites of this lineage, the fire rituals, the offerings, the therapy. So, more meditation and internal alchemy in the outer school, which is where you're at, which is still kind of a preparation. Then in the inner school, it's more ritual, less internal alchemy. And then at a certain point, you transcend, even the need of the teacher. The need of the teacher is just to help guide you and help you understand some experiences that you begin to have. But once the universe begins opening up, the angels begin coming to you and teaching you. And, you become what we call a kleto, or God caller. Then your education takes on a different dimension. We can't really put a time limit on this because theurgy is a way of life. Philosophy is a way of life. Some of you may practice very hard to achieve gnosis. You'll achieve self-realization in 6 or 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. Some of you may take much longer. Some of you might take a very long time to reach one state on the path, but then reach the other ones very quickly. Some of you might do the opposite. It depends on your lives. It depends on your families. It depends on your jobs. It depends on your mindset. It depends on your emotional reality, your psychological reality, your physical reality. So don't right now throw out of your head the idea that you're in some kind of race, that you're in some kind of competition with other students, that you're in some kind of race with people that started at the same time as you. There's no race because you cannot possibly fathom the finish line for each person. The finish line for each person is totally different. They all say finish, right? They all say, in Greek we say teleos, the end. They all say the end, but some of them have a 10-mile run, some of them have a 1-mile run. You can't judge yourself because you're looking at yourself just from the perspective of this one incarnation. You have countless incarnations that you're going to be working through, the karmas, the residue of which you're going to be processing and working through. And then all of us have different life experiences. It might take an army veteran who's been on a military campaign longer to reach gnosis than, a 20-year-old kid who's never really gone through much in life, depending on their states of mind. It could do the opposite as well. But the war veteran has a lot more to work through. There's more life experiences. There's a more complex psychology. There's more pain. There's more trauma. Those things have to be worked through for enlightenment to come. So we can't worry about a race because there's no way to understand even how far your path is, how many miles you have to run, let alone how far somebody else's path is. So because of this, drop that totally. Practice because you want to be a good person. Practice because you love God. Practice because you want to learn to love yourself and be at peace with yourself and harmony with yourself. Forget about everything else. And then naturally enlightenment will dawn. And it will come when it comes. And when it does come, so just be happy that it came. You won't be worried about how long that it took. So these are things, these immature concepts. People have a lot of immature concepts about the spiritual path at first. If you came here to learn how to do magical things, then, God willing, your mindset will change. If it doesn't, this won't be the place for you. Yes, of course you'll learn some magical things, but you can learn magical things from all over the place. You can learn magical things from, a witch doctor down the road. You can learn magical things from many, many sorcerers and charlatans out there. We're concerned with wisdom. We're concerned with wisdom of what is real and what is not real. We're concerned with realization of our inner divinity. We're concerned with peace and with love. We are lovers of wisdom. That means we are lovers and we are in love with wisdom. So this is our way of life. And this is how we must approach it. Now I want to speak a little bit about the pinnacles of these different kinds of training and what it is that we're cultivating. Ultimately, we're cultivating our inner divinity. We're awakening divinity. But we can awaken divinity in a number of different ways. There's different aspects, different parts of ourselves. The soul will recognize its own divinity. This we call gnosis. This is when you have those metanoia, those changes of consciousness that occur, those changes of mind that occur, that allow you to see the world in a different way, allow you to interpret your experiences in a different way. And this we call enlightenment or self-realization. But you shouldn't get too hung up on these terms. It's just gnosis. It means you've recognized yourself. Directly experienced yourself as you are. And now you act from that place. And you'll see it more, first you'll see it just like glimpses through a window. You'll see it like a little ray of sun coming through the clouds. And then the clouds will cover it back up again. Gradually over time, the sun will come. The clouds will disperse, the sky will be clear and blue. And you'll recognize your innate nature. You recognize that you are the sun. You recognize that those rays are your own. Until then, it'll come and it'll go. You keep practicing, you have good faith, you have due diligence in your practice, and work on your way of life and your way of thinking. The gnosis is certain to occur. With these practices, I guarantee gnosis will occur if your way of life is good. And gnosis is essentially an intellectual thing. It's the mind recognizing the nature of the soul. It's the soul learning to see itself. And so we do contemplative practices, and we try to study some philosophy when we can. And we consider our thoughts, we consider our opinions, We try to purify ourselves of ignorance the best we can. We try to cultivate real knowledge of things. And we become sticklers for the truth. We try to search out the truth anywhere we can. If there's somebody who we think has knowledge, we try to learn it. Then there's the energetic side of our practice. This is the training of our breath, the training of purifying the organs and the blood, the training of activating the inherent power that is stored inside every single cell of our being that is lying dormant there. And this we do through very traditional, very ancient practices to help purify ourselves, purify our energy, and light it on fire with the fire of the gods. Engage our own light with the divine light. And this we call internal alchemy. And this internal alchemy is to turn us into a philosopher's stone. This happens more on an energetic level, on a physical level. So then your health restores, your eyes become bright and shiny, your face has a nice splendor to it, your presence is good, your voice is good. Your health becomes stronger, your longevity becomes good. And gradually certain faculties awaken, such as clairvoyance, clairsentience, knowing some things that you otherwise shouldn't know. These things are all actually what just in the tradition of the Taoists, we would say that this is just what a healthy person should be like. A healthy person should have clairvoyance. A healthy person should be able to see spirits. So we're repairing ourselves to get back to the way the ancients were, to get back to the way their bodies were. And the height of this is when we've really lit ourselves on fire to the extent that our cells begin to turn into light. And we call this the body of light, cultivating the body of light. So the body of light is what in theurgy and philosophical parlance we would say happens when we exchange a mortal life for a divine life, for an immortal life. We take our worldly life and we exchange it for a heavenly life. And life is a kind of energy, a kind of activity. And this becomes more purified and more divine as we practice. So that gradually strange things start happening. Maybe you disappear in some pictures. Maybe, there's pictures of rainbow light coming off of you. You start having dreams of rainbows emitting from your cells and seeing yourself stretched across the universe. Many different things will happen. And there's a kind of electricity that your body gains. Electrical things will stop working as well, all kinds of weird things. But this is because your internal power is becoming active. So now your power is becoming more like that of a heavenly being, as opposed to that of a worldly being. And so we work on this too. We do many practices over time, depending where you're at, which level you're at. That is very much a science. That's probably the most scientific aspect of this path, is the internal alchemy. Internal alchemy has to be very precise. It is not a psychological thing. You can't trick your teacher or yourself into thinking you achieve something with internal alchemy. There are definite physical signs that are absolutely impossible to fake, that show your teacher that you're ready for the next set of practices. So that's the internal alchemy aspect of the training. And then there's what we would consider proper theurgy. These are the litanies, the prayers, the invocations, the offerings, the supplications. Learning how to connect to the angelic realities and powers. Learning how to connect to the noetic realities and powers, the heavenly realities and powers. Learning how to unify our soul to something more divine than itself. And the essence of theurgy, the height, the summit of theurgy, is what we call apopsia. Apopsia means to see face to face, and it refers to seeing the divine. It means that the divine came to you and appeared to you as though it was in the flesh. You saw it with your eyes open in a waking state. First, you begin to see the divine in dreams, but gradually it'll come in the flesh. It will come seemingly in the flesh, even though, of course, it's a divine body. And it blesses you and it merges its energy with yours. And now when you act from the place of that divinity. And this is really what real theurgy is. Theurgy is having achieved the apopsia, we can now engage in divine activity. We can perform many miracles and wonders to benefit the world, to benefit mankind from this place of inner divinity that's been established, unifying our energies with something more divine than us. So these are kind of these three summits in a way. You can see theurgy as being these three mountains, right? Each with these summits. One is gnosis, one is the body of light, one is the apoptic vision. And these three, when done in the right way, can all happen. Actually, gnosis will come first, and then the body of light and the apoptic vision will come actually at the same time. If you've done your training properly, then when the divinity presents itself before you, its divine energy activates your divine energy. And its divine consciousness merges with yours. And now you experience kenosis, you experience the body of light, and you see the vision of the deity all at the same time. And this vision of the divine was the traditional aim of theurgy, an encounter with the gods. Theurgy is the science of encountering the divine. So contemplation is the science of recognizing your innate nature, recognizing your soul. Internal alchemy is the science of activating the latent power in your cells and in your DNA. Theurgy is the science of encountering God. And all these things are sciences. There's definite ways to them. And you're going to learn this, and you're going to learn these practices over time, depending on your hard work. At first, you have to perform the preliminary cycle. The preliminary cycle exists for a few reasons. For one, it purifies you on a number of different levels, subtly, simply. It purifies you on a number of different levels, so that your later practices have more power to them. Secondly, it develops meditative discipline. You have to be able to sit for 45 minutes to an hour at a time, sometimes an hour and a half at a time, depending on how long it takes you to do your preliminary cycle. And really, if you want to make good progress, you do that twice a day. So you might be doing 2 or 3 hours a day of practice. And so it begins to develop your sitting discipline, because as you'll learn when you pass through this school, 2 to 3 hours a day of spiritual practice is expected of students in this school. We are working on some teachings that are a little bit simpler and more for the public, that don't require initiation and empowerments, that we can share with people, that you can be empowered to share with people, and help begin to guide them onto the theurgic path. But for now, TDS itself is assuming you're a more serious practitioner. TDS is for serious practitioners. It is not for people who want to dabble around in the shallow pond. It is for people ready to dive into the deep. So you'll be expected to be practicing 2 to 3 hours a day and working your way up to that as soon as you can, and having a disciplined daily routine. Making sure, and this is important, to practice at the same time each day, the best that you can. At least keeping it to, I practice in the morning each day, or I practice in the evening each day, or I practice in the morning and evening each day. Because your body has internal rhythms. It has its own biorhythms. And if you make your practices line up with it, your practices will almost start to do themselves at that time each day. So that when you do miss it occasionally, it's not a big thing. But if your practice is all over the place, your body will never be able to adjust, to harmonize itself with your practice. So having a disciplined life, having a disciplined way of life, a disciplined routine is important for your practice. The third thing about the preliminary cycle is that it allows your teachers, such as me and Teresa, to know how much you've practiced. Because you'll be expected to do 600 rounds of the preliminary cycle. That's approximately 600 hours of meditation. So after you've done 600 hours of meditation, you're quite skilled now at meditation. Your sitting discipline is good, your mind is more honed, your energy is pure, and I have faith that I can give you more higher practices and you'll really do them now. Because you have a good disciplined routine, you've done 600 hours of meditation. So even on our end as teachers, the preliminary cycle serves a little bit as a test. It's a struggle for you all. It's your first chance to illustrate to us that you care about this and that you're dedicated to it. There's no time limit on the preliminary education. Your preliminary education could take you years for all I care. It's up to you. You can pass through your preliminary education. Probably the quickest you could do it is in a year. If you did all your preliminary cycles twice a day, and you really studied your material, there's 2 aspects to this school. There's praxis, right? There's your practice. And there's theoria, there's your theory, your education, right? Paideia. You have to study both these things. You have to engage in both these things. So in order for you to pass into level 1, you not only need to have shown that you've done your 600 hours of practice, your 600 preliminary cycles, you also need to be able to pass a written test that is generally not just a simple, Q&A. You need to be able to actually give some essay answers and things like this, showing that you have a good understanding of the lecture material in the preliminary cycle. And there's 2 aspects to the lecture material in the preliminary cycle. There's the more technical occult teachings, magical teachings, esoteric teachings. We teach you about the planets and teach you about the elements, the universe, the cosmos, the different levels of energy in your body. Because any good theurgist needs to understand and know these things. Knowledge is a kind of power. And then there's the philosophical and ethical lectures that help talk about how a theurgist should live, how a theurgist should think. Trying to teach you, and this is an important thing, to teach you how to think, not what to think. Modern education is dedicated solely to cramming things in your brain, to teaching you what to think. They want you to think what they want you to think. Philosophy is about learning how to think, and that's what we are going to be working on also in this school during this time, is learning how to think so that you can purify yourself of some ignorant concepts and ideas in your life that are governing your life, and learn how to think a little better. And I don't mean that in any kind of insulting or derogatory way. Everybody suffers from this now. And people have forgotten how to think well. And you'll find if you try to read a little bit of philosophy, it might be a little difficult on your brain at first. Some people say that even they get headaches. That's because your brain has to learn how to think, right? This isn't just memorization. It has to learn how to apply reason and critical thinking to things. We want to be as well-rounded a person as we can. That means we want to be healthy, we want to be disciplined, we want to have a sharp mind, we want to have good education, we want to be good people, we want to be selfless, but not so selfless that people take advantage of. We don't want to be weak, we want to be strong and selfless. We want to be disciplined, we want to be virtuous. But as Aristotle says, there's the proper amount of each virtue, right? Depending on the situation. And this we call temperance. Temperance is when you can engage, you can act properly for that situation. Right? You may need to be more courageous in battle than you have to be, you know, scolding your child. You don't want to attack your child with the same ferocity of courage that you did in a battle. So these things have their own levels. Learning how to act accordingly in each situation. Learning how to be a good person, a selfless person, a charitable person who takes care of the people around them. And conducting yourself like a theurgist, so that your way of life, just your way of life. So if somebody didn't even know what practices you did, they could just imitate your way of life and their life would be better. Their life would be more filled with meaning. How profound would that be if you could have that effect on people? People always wanting to know how they can benefit the world. But the main way you can benefit the world is to live in a way that if the world lived, the world would benefit. And people, when they see a way of life, people are hungry for a way of life. If you have a good way of life and people can see it, people will imitate it. And then you'll really begin to benefit people. So there's 4 pillars to theurgy, classical theurgy. As you see, the sun is really shining down now, so it's a little bright. And this is one of the only things that are in the lectures of the preliminary cycle. That's a little bit more detailed, but I feel like it's always good during the preliminary empowerments to go over. So there's a classical arrangement of these 4 pillars of theurgy. This means that theurgy is comprised of these 4 things. These are the 4 supports of it. And where you don't have these, you don't have theurgy. And the first of these we call theoria. Theoria means holy contemplation. Theoria means divine recollection, divine contemplation. And we use theoria to represent contemplation on God, applying dialectic to ourselves, meaning cutting away some of the ignorance in our minds and exploring ourselves and trying to figure out who am I, what am I not. And thinking about divine things and the divinity in the self. This is theoria, contemplation of the divine. And then there's, next what we have is therapeia. And therapeia is the worship, the offerings, the supplications. These things help purify the obscurations. So we have different kinds of obscurations. We have internal obscurations, meaning we have done things that have impeded our connection to ourselves. We have done things that have impeded our recognition of our own self, our own soul. Then there's external obscurations. This means that we have done things that have impeded our connection to the divine outside of us. either through activities, ways of thinking, karmas from previous lives. So there's walls between us and the divine, outside of us in the universe, just as there are walls between us and our own inner divinity. So therapeia is what helps us, literally it's where we get our word therapy from, right? It heals the soul by connecting it back to its source in the divine, and by purifying the soul itself so that the soul recognizes its own divinity and it recognizes the outer divinity. Theoria and therapia are really the two cruxes of theurgy. They go hand in hand. The way that we mainly engage in therapia, you'll learn some therapia, like a very simple fire ritual that you'll eventually learn. You'll learn how to do what we call the pentaspendia, how to make offerings. And you can do those at your leisure. Those are not required practices of this lineage. Those are things for people who want to connect to the divine, but they don't have a way. They're already doing that. We have Muslim students, we have Christian students, we have some Jewish students, we have Hindu students, we have Buddhist students. If you have a way to connect to the divine, engage in that. But if you're feeling a little bit adrift, there are some ways that we engage. There are some ways that we remember the divine. And you'll read about this in some of the lectures. We talk about things like the Orphic egg. We talk about the seal of the school. And there's ways that you can kind of connect to divinity in these ways. And you'll learn those. And there's prayers, there's hymns, there's chants. All these things are part of therapia. Then in the inner school, the therapia takes the form of very lengthy invocations and supplications, trying to really create a dynamic tension between you and the divine that lifts your soul up and pulls the divine down, so that they mingle within yourself. And then the third and fourth pillars. The third is telestais, or telesiorgia. And this means, this is the operative part of theurgy. This means talismans and magic rituals and incantations, sacred chants and mudras that make things happen. Right? This is the miracle working aspect. This is telesiorgia, thaumaturgy. This is where through your theoria and therapia, you developed a certain kind of divinity. And now through kind of things such as talismans and specific rituals and mantras, you can now engage in enlightened activity. You can project that divinity out into the universe and use it to help people and to benefit beings. So you can bring rain at a place where there's drought, and you can help people with their sicknesses, and you can help protect people spiritually. And then there's moerseisi, which is initiation. Moerseisi means, initiation is a huge part of theurgy. You're going to even have an empowerment as a kind of initiation. It's a projection of my energy into you to help connect you to our lineage. And that's what we're going to be doing today. When you're initiated into the inner school, there's another level of that occurs, a much more intimate level of communion between yourself and the energy of the lineage. But also, and this is the most important, for moerseisi, the real crux of it is that the universe begins to initiate you itself. Different beings, angels, and divine realities begin presenting themselves and empowering you into their levels of reality. And they come to you both in dream and in waking. And through this is the real moesi. This is the real initiation that the theurgist aspires for. It's the initiation which comes from the universe. So these four pillars, theoria, therapia, telestais, and moesesi. These four things, and you'll see there's a lecture on this in the preliminary cycle. These four things are kind of the foundation, the essence of your theurgic practice, and of how a theurgist really lives. A part of a theurgist's life is contemplating the divine. A part of a theurgist's life is remembering the divine practically through offerings and incantations and supplications. A part of a theurgist's life is helping other people through talismans, through praying for them, through offering any healing or spiritual protection that you can. And a part of being a theurgist is receiving initiation, constantly striving for more knowledge, constantly reaching for more wisdom, and receiving initiation from the higher realities, from the angels and the archangels that come and present themselves to you over time. So this is really the essence of what you're going to be working towards for the rest of your time here in the school. And your time here, these things, the only oaths that you'll take and that you'll generally be asked to take in the school is that you don't teach things before you're ready to teach them. That you keep certain things secret. You don't communicate them to your friends and family. And that can be, for example, just like the techniques that you're going to learn. I'm going to ask you that you keep it sacred by keeping it secret. Why? Because you don't know the preliminary cycle well enough to teach it to somebody else. You could harm them instead of helping them. There's a lot of different dynamics to the preliminary cycle. It needs to be explained to you by someone who knows it well. So these are very simple kind of oaths, that will ask you to take, just things to help protect the integrity of the teachings and protect the integrity of the spiritual path. So when it's learned properly. So these are all the pithy things. These are all the basic heart instructions I wanted to give you so that you all have a good understanding of what it is that you're getting into. Okay? The door isn't locked behind you once you join the school. There's a door. I only ask that if you leave through the door, that you don't try to tear the house down on your way out like some people do. This path is not, there's no such thing as a path for everybody. There's no such thing as the best path. The best path is the path that gets you to enlightenment. That is it. That is the best path. Maybe it's my way. Maybe it's somebody else's way. It doesn't matter to me. The important thing is that you choose with good knowledge, right? That you really know what it is that you're doing, and that you put the time and effort into it to know whether or not it is what worked for you. It's very popular nowadays to have people who spend 20, 30 years jumping from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher. That is not seeking wisdom. That's not. That's seeking book knowledge, and that is seeking approval. Right? There's other more complicated psychological things happening there. A person seeking wisdom, when he feels he has found a path and a teacher that can provide it, a person seeking wisdom clings to them with everything they have. That's the only way you'll get into the deeper levels. That's the only way you'll recognize those inner realities. So I ask that you've come this far. Give the system some time and some due, contemplate it, really exert yourself in it, keep in touch with your teachers. Talathan's the main teacher for the preliminary cycle at the moment. And so he'll be the one who will be helping guide you and instruct you through your time with there. Upon entering into level 1, then I will be guiding you. So we're now going to take another 10 or 15 minute little break. And when we come back, we will talk about the preliminary cycle practice itself, the theory involved in it, how to perform it, and then we'll do the energetic empowerment into it. Yes, so God bless. Be victorious. I'll be back with you all shortly. Okay, so we will begin with our teachings concerning the preliminary cycle itself, the preliminary cycle of practice. Mess with my camera here a little bit. Oh, wow, the sun is really, this is better. Okay. Now when I do this, it looks very, very bright. There's a lot of light coming up. So, as I said, if you're receiving this for the first time, you really need to read the instructions in the article section of the website on the practice of the preliminary cycle. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about it, the philosophy behind it, the different steps of each of it and how to perform it. And then we'll do the empowerment into it. Now we begin in the preliminary cycle of practice with sitting, right? With taking our stance, taking our seat, our throne. And this we often call establishing the throne. The yogis call it establishing your asana. And this is the importance of how you sit when you practice. So you see when you read the manual that I wrote on it, some different suggestions are given for how to sit. There's a few main positions. The best is a full lotus posture. If you can sit in full lotus, sit in full lotus. If you can't sit in full lotus, but you feel like you could one day, then do some stretches so that you can learn how to sit in full lotus. The second best is half lotus. You can also sit in on your knees and like the Seiza style for Zen meditation. And if you sit in a chair, and you can sit in a chair, but if you sit in a chair, you should make sure that your knees and feet are touching, right? Don't open up the knees too wide because then you lose energy from the lower half of the body. So knees are together, feet are together. This is an important thing. Now, no matter what you do with your legs, the back needs to be straight. Okay? That doesn't mean that you're arched real far back. It means that your back has its natural curvature. Okay, you're not hunched forward. Your chest isn't sticking too much out. Your shoulders are relaxed. The hands are in the lap. And your posture is straight. Now, to really sit straight and to align your cranium with your sacrum, one of the things you're going to need to do is kind of gently tuck your chin back. Okay? Not down. You'll have to kind of gently pull the head back. Like if you're going to pull the head up and back an inch. And you'll feel a little bit of pressure on the back of the skull here, in the back of the cranium. And this lines up your pituitary gland with your spinal column, helps line it up. It lines up your cranium and your sacrum, because these are the heaven and earth of your body. These things need to be aligned the best as possible. And it allows for better posture overall. And the better your posture is, the less painful hours of sitting in meditation will be. Now, first you might feel some really intense pains when you sit and practice because your energy channels are blocked off. So your back might really bother you. Your upper back might bother you, which is more of like liver stuff happening. Your lower back might bother you, which is kidney things happening. Your hips might bother you. Your shoulders might bother you. Your neck might bother you a lot. All these things indicate that these are energetic blockages. You'll find that when your energy flows nice and freely after you have more practice, under your belt, then you'll find that you can sit undisturbed in meditation for much longer periods of time. So when you begin, how you sit is important. So you sit, you cross your legs, and you still your mind, you still your body. You regulate your breath. You just breathe in and out nice and calm and relaxed. You make sure that your shoulders are relaxed. The chin is very kind of slightly tucked back so that the head aligns with the sacrum. The spine has its natural curvature to it. The legs are crossed in a traditional position, or you're sitting in the chair with your feet and knees together. And you've isolated your body from the earth somehow. Now, in a lot of houses today where you have carpet and things, you're isolated anyways. But if you're practicing outside or on a stone floor, there'll be times where I'll tell you the opposite, right? With your internal alchemy, there'll be some practices where I say you have to go, your butt has to be on the earth. You need to be grounding out when you do this practice. But for the preliminary cycle, this is not the case. For the preliminary cycle, you're trying to develop your internal fire and purify yourself. So purification is a little bit different than generation. Internal alchemy, we generate energy. We're generating more energy. In preliminary cycle, we're purifying ourselves. Purifying is a heat thing, right? Heat purifies, water nourishes. So we have fire practices and water practices. Preliminary cycle is a fire practice. It helps purify us. It purifies our breath, our energy flow, our mind, our karmas. So by making sure we insulate our body from the earth, we can help build more fire. So we're properly insulated. The spine is in its natural position. And when you're not chanting, anytime during this entire cycle of practices that you're not chanting, your tongue should be on the roof of the mouth. There's several different places for the tongue to be in the mouth. If the tongue is up right behind the front teeth, with the tip touching right behind the front teeth, we call that the fire point. Fire point is for physical health. If you're feeling sick, you meditate with your tongue at the fire point. Then, if you move the tongue back from behind the teeth, an inch, maybe an inch and a half, your tongue goes into a natural groove in the center of the palate. That's called the water point. That is the place where your tongue is going to be for 99% of your practices in this school, is at the water point. If you bring your tongue even further back, then it touches the uvula. That's what we call the air point. That is for some higher practices and for deep meditation to help control the flow of your energy. If you bring the tongue down and touch the tip of the tongue at the base of the frenum, that's the earth point. That's for grounding your energies. Right, so fire, water, air, earth. Those 4 points get used in different ways. Do not use them interchangeably. The only ones that you should allow yourself to play with a little bit are fire and water, based on if you're feeling sick or not. If you're feeling sick or very weak, you can do some of your practices at the fire point, right behind the front teeth, and it'll help rejuvenate your body a little bit more. But for spiritual evolution, for now, the tongue at the water point in the center of the palate is the most important thing. This opens up the channel between the back of the body and the front of the body. It connects them. The channel that runs along the back of the body, up the spine, down the front of the forehead, it ends at the palate. The channel that runs down the front of the body begins at the end of the tongue. So when we talk, of course, we always spend a lot of energy because we break these channels. In meditation, if we're not chanting, we want the tongue to be at the water point, uniting these two channels and energies together. Now, we begin with chanting Yao, just like we did before. And I advise you to get a bell. You're going to need some ritual implements over the course of time, but a good one to get right away is a bell. There's all kinds of little bells you can get. A lot of us like to use little Tibetan bells because, well, because we don't have our own shop yet to forge our own bells. Right? Maybe one day we will, God willing. But you can get a number of different kinds of bells. Something that has a nice sound to it. Okay. And we chant the bell. The ringing of the bell purifies the atmosphere around us. Negative spirits don't like the sound of a good bell because it pierces, it disturbs the energy in the area and kind of moves it quickly. So ringing the bell and chanting is not only a good practice for your brain because you're doing two different things at the same time at a slightly different pace. Some people have a very hard time with ringing the bell and chanting at the same time. That's because the left and right hemispheres of the brain are having a hard time communicating. So relaxing and chanting. Doing it like this. Letting your mind immerse itself into the hymn and contemplating your own divinity and contemplating the divinity in the universe that your divinity comes from. Stilling the mind as much as you can. Chant this as long as you need to for you to settle into your practice. Maybe your mind's already feeling very good. You just chant it a few times to clear your energy and clear the energy of the room. Because negative spirits don't like the sounds of these things. But if the mind's quite running all over the place, or you're just working all day, you should sit and you should hum this for 5 or 10 minutes until the mind really settles. You need to create the space psychologically, energetically, physically, emotionally for your practice. This is important. Even when you sit to practice, you should have a space in your house that's dedicated to your practice. Even if it's just a little nook in a room that you can curtain off, or you can separate somehow, or just put a little seat there for you. But there should be a place that's sacred to you, that you do your sacred practices in. And chanting Yao is part of how we create the space energetically and psychologically for our practice. Because even if physically we're in our nook, or we're in our room, we may have a separate room just for our practice, which is really ideal. Chanting Yao helps put us in the psychological and energetic place for our practice. So chant Yao until you feel connected to the divine, and the mind settles more, and you feel calm and peaceful. Then when you feel calm and peaceful, you will visualize the masters. And you can do this a number of ways. A simple way is to just visualize the seal, right? The image of the school that you see at the top of the website. That's the seal of the school. It contains with it a blessing and an energy that represents the energy of the school and its master. So you can just visualize that and chant the next chant. Or you can think of your teachers. You can think of some of the masters of this lineage, like Plato, Pythagoras. You can think of any spiritual teacher that's influenced you, whether you met them or not. Whether maybe you just read a book that you really liked. Right? You can think of them and visualize all of them in an assembly. If you're visualizing the school seal, you can just visualize that. If you're visualizing a number of different teachers, then it is appropriate to include myself into that visualization as well, since you're visualizing the forms of some different teachers, right? That way you can connect to my energies and the school's energies as well together. But don't do it in any kind of worshipful way. Don't be weird about it. Just visualize it to connect to me a little bit, connect to my form and to my energy. And then after, the mind settled with the Yao, we visualize the masters, or we visualize the school seal. And we chant the Makar Hostas. Now the Makar Hostas goes like this. We hold our hand in the chalice mudra here, which means the thumbs and the little fingers are touching, like we're holding a goblet, like our hand became a chalice. And we say, Makar Hostas Yuraimon, Teletas Teoneros, Biotan Nagestue Kai, Theastue Etaipsukan. And after we chant the 4 lines in the Makar Hostas, we bring our hand up to the forehead here. And we say, and we see all the masters, or we see the school seal bringing light down into our nous, into the top of the head. Then we bring all that light down into our heart, and we say, ah. And then, like a chalice, like we're pouring it to the world, we offer that light to the world and to all the beings in this world, and we say, oh. And so, O. Dissolving the energy of the masters into ourselves, bringing it into our heart, mixing it with ourselves, and then pouring it out into the world to bless the world as well. And after we've kind of opened this with the Makar Hostas kind of connected to the energy, you chant the Makar Hostas now quicker. You chant the Makar Hostas 36 times. Okay. You'll need to get a string of beads to keep count, ideally. Or you can just count it on the individual parts. Each finger has 3 parts, right? So you can count through here, this is 12. And just do that 3 times, right? And you can keep count how many times you've done it with the other hand, right? And then 3rd finger, count the 12. So when you're chanting it, you chant it a little quicker, right? When you're doing it for practice. System record hostas judaimon to the tasteonidos, Vatanius Drake, the stereotype silkon, record hostas judaimon to the tasteonidos, Vatanius Drake, the stereotype silkon, record hostas judaimon to the tasteonidos, Vatanius Drake, the stereotype silkon, record hostas judaimon to the tasteonidos, Vatanius Drake, the stereotype silkon. You chant it like this 36 times. You can continue to visualize the school seal or connect to the masters or any masters that have influenced you. Okay. And chanting it like this over and over 36 times. So when we chant Iao, we're meditating on God. We're trying to purify the obscurations between us and God and just enjoy the peace and the light of divinity. And we're concentrating on a divine light radiating and filling us as we chant Iao. When we chant the Makar Hostas, now we're purifying any obstructions between ourselves and the lineage, any obstructions between that would keep us from receiving the full blessings and benefit of our teachings and of our lineage. And we chant the Makar Hostas 36 times. So these are now the two obscurations we've cleared with these practices. With Iao, we tried to clear any impediments between us and God. With Makar Hostas, we clear the impediments between us and the lineage. Now we do what is called the sun and moon breathing. And this is a simple alternate nostril practice, alternate nostril breathing to tonify the nervous system, purify our blood, oxygenate the body, and settle the energies that flow through our body. So to do this, we'll take the right hand, put the thumb to the base of the ring, finger, like that. And then using only the ring finger, we're going to alternate closing the right and the left nostrils. Okay. When we do this, we're going to inhale light. Through the left, fill our body with light. Switch, close the left nostril, exhale smoke out of the right nostril. Inhale light through the right. Fill the body with light, exhale smoke out of the left. And we continue like this. Inhaling light through the left, exhaling smoke out of the right. Inhaling light through the right, exhaling smoke out of the left. Inhaling light through the left, exhaling smoke out of the right. Inhaling light through the right, exhaling smoke through the left. So in through the left, out through the right, in through the right, out through the left is one round. Okay, so you would have inhaled and exhaled out of both sides. That's one round of the sun and moon breathing. You will do this at least 9 times. But 36 is really ideal. If you have the extra time and you want your practice session to be longer, you do this 36 times. If you're a little tight on time or your sitting discipline isn't quite there, you'll do this 9 times. But don't do it less than 9 times. 9 full rounds. In through the left, out through the right. In through the right, out through the left. Make sure that your inhale and your exhale are even. There's no breath retention with this practice, not yet. Right? So make sure that if you inhale for 6 seconds, you exhale for 6 seconds. And I recommend that you start at 6 seconds, that you start with a 6-second inhale, 6-second exhale. Work your way up to a 12-second inhale, 12-second exhale. And then from there, if you can even do 15 in, 15 out, that's really good, because that's, 1 minute per round, right? 30 seconds to inhale and exhale, 30 seconds to inhale and exhale. That's a nice 1 minute long round. Okay. But that means that if you can do that, that means that your breath is really getting nice and clean. Your energy is getting nice and clean. Your body is well oxygenated. If you have a hard time with even the 6 seconds, that means your body's deprived of oxygen for some reason. In today's world, that usually means it's inflamed, right? Our body, our nervous system is inflamed. Our cells are inflamed. And that means they're burning up oxygen, which means we're aging quicker. We're graying quicker. And we're not as healthy. We're stressed out. Okay. So this practice helps reduce your stress. It helps engage the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. It oxygenates the body. So once you can do 6 seconds easily, Then do 7 seconds, inhale, exhale. Then 8 seconds, inhale, exhale. Work your way up to a good 12 seconds in, 12 seconds out, 12 seconds in, 12 seconds out. And that's one round. Good 48-second round is good. If you can do a minute-long round, that's even better. But 48-second round is ideal. At 12 seconds, inhale, 12, and don't count it like your time. Don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, like take a little clock, learn how to count seconds. Okay, eventually you get used to it. You won't need the clock. Or go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, whatever you need to do, but don't speed up. It's better to get 12 seconds and going too slow than 12 seconds and going too fast. Okay. So make sure to really focus. This is important practice. This is very purifying. There's many different levels to this practice you'll learn over the years. Okay, especially when you come to retreats and make people do a lot of breath work, because it purifies them. It's very purifying practice. So this purifies our energy. This purifies the energy on the left and right channels. There's 3 really important channels in the center of our body. One runs along the left side of the nostril, and it comes down along the left side of the spine. One runs along the right side of the spine. These represent the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems, respectively. So this practice purifies both of these. So now at this point, we've purified obscurations between us and the divine. We purified obscurations between us and our lineage, and now we're purifying obscurations and the left and right channels, which deal with our subconscious and our conscious mind, our waking mind and our sleeping mind, right? Our stressed out active self and our relaxed tired self. Trying to harmonize these things, left and right hemispheres of the brain as well. Now that we purified this, now we're going to go even more inside. We're going to focus on the central channel. So what we do next is we call the deity purification. And this is the crux of the preliminary cycle. All the practices before the preliminary cycle are really just to build up to this. And then the practices afterwards are to kind of distribute and ground from it. So this practice, what we're going to do is depending on your religious orientation and your personal beliefs, you can change this up a little bit. This practice is a little bit flexible in terms of what mantra you use, what name you use. If there's a particular deity, whether it be Jesus or it be Muhammad or it be, some particular Buddha, Bodhisattva that you're connected to, some Indian deity you're connected to, whatever it is. If there's a particular deity you're connected to, you can use the name of that deity or a mantra associated with that situation. Right? And you can use that to purify the central channel. If there's no personal deity that you're working with and you just want a good way to connect to the divine, the way that we recommend to do it is by chanting Yao. But you do it quickly, not like before you go Yao, 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 Yao. And what you're going to do is you're going to visualize an Orphic egg, basically just a brilliant, resplendent egg that represents the universe up above you. And it's going to be spinning. And as it's spinning, I'm not going to go into which direction it's spinning. You can just read about that because people have a difficult time with that. So you can read it in the booklet. But it's spinning. And as you're chanting, with no regard for your breath, you're just chanting. Okay, but you are chanting out loud. You're at least muttering it. You're visualizing that a divine nectar, a white nectar, is pouring down from that egg in through the top of your head right here. So not up here. This is not the top of the head we're coming in through. It's further back, the very crown point here, where the very top is. Through the top of the head, this nectar is pouring into your central channel. The central channel, here in this instance, we mean the center from every direction. The center from the sides, the center from the front and back, the direct center of the body. Okay, running down the center of the throat, center of the chest cavity, center of the abdominal cavity, down into the perineum at the base of the body. Right. This energy, this channel is being filled with light, resplendent with light, being filled with this nectar. And as this channel becomes filled with this divine nectar from chanting the divine name, your whole body gradually becomes filled with this white nectar. And as your body becomes filled with this white nectar, a black, thick smoke begins kind of being chased out of your pores. So as you're chanting it, you're becoming more filled with light, and more of the smoke is leaving you. Right? More of this kind of black slime is leaving you and going back to nature. We have a symbiotic relationship with nature. So what is toxic to you is good, is oxygen for nature, right? Your exhale is nature's inhale. So you're kind of sending that into nature, where nature will receive it and purify it and send it back to other beings. So you're visualizing the Orphic egg spinning, and as it spins, there's a divine nectar coming down from it, right? Like a steady stream, like a little waterfall, coming down, a beautiful, brilliantly glowing, like the full moon on a clear night. Glowing white nectar, filling the central channel of the body, and then once the central channel is nice and full and shining brightly, it spills over into the rest of the body, from the toes all the way up to the top of the head, to the ends of the fingers, filling yourself with this divine nectar, and seeing a black smoke ooze out of your pores and go back to the universe, go back to nature to be recycled. If you're using just kind of a quick, simple mantra like Iao, then you'll do this 1,200 times, right? Which, if you have one of our strands of prayer beads, or any 100 bead strand of prayer beads, that means you'll do the whole strand 12 times of Yao, 12 full times around the prayer beads. This will be 1,200 repetitions. Any other similar quick prayer, you know, just based on how quick it takes to say it, do it 1,200 times, right, or thereabout. Another way of doing this, there's a mantra in our school, there's a legomena in our school that's very popular because it was revealed to us, and so it's kind of a revelation in the school, called the Hecatonomai. It means the 100 names of Dionysos. The Hecatonomai is a common practice among students in the school who don't feel particularly connected to any other religion, but they feel kind of a connection to Dionysos because Dionysos, his energy has a special connection to this lineage. So they like to chant the Hecatonomai. The Hecatonomai, as I said before, with any religious chant, there are no chants or mantras pushed upon you in this school that in any way on their own can make you uncomfortable, right? For example, the Hecatonomai will never be a practice that students in TDS have to engage in. It is an additional auxiliary prayer of 100 names of Dionysos. Dionysos represents the perfect soul. Dionysos represents the perfectly enlightened being. In a sense, you're just connecting to your own soul when you chant the Hecatonomai. But you'll never be forced to say it. Right? If you are a Muslim and there's some Muslim prayers you want to say instead, like La ilaha illallah, you don't even need to visualize an egg. You can just visualize a pillar of light coming down into you and purifying you as you pray. Right? The important thing is that light is coming in, and nectar is coming in, filling the body, and smoke is leaving. And that is doing this through the central channel, that whatever it is entering in through the top of the head. We're purifying the central channel here. And we're really trying to dissolve ourselves into that idea of deity. So we need some concept of divinity here that we're working with. Whether you're visualizing Jesus and you're saying Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, right? Or you're visualizing the Orphic egg and chanting Yao, Yao, Yao. Visualizing Dionysos chanting the Hecatonomai, in which case you do it 12 full rounds instead of 1,200, right? Hecatonomai. It would take probably 28, 30 hours to do 1,200 rounds of Hecatonomai. So, chanting in this way, purifying the central channel in this way. You gradually, you do this practice. So now at this point, we purified aspirations between us and the divine the best we can. We purified aspirations between us and the masters with the Makar Hostess prayer. We purified aspirations in the solar and lunar channels on either side of the spine. Now, after deity purification, we've asked God to purify the central channel, which is the most important channel. It's the one that holds our consciousness. It's directly connected to the spine as well. The spine is a manifestation of the central channel. And so now we purified these aspirations. And if you read the booklet, I'm just reviewing the booklet here to see if there's something in particular I wanted to mention. If you read the booklet, you'll see that there's some different methods of some of these different practices given too that you can kind of play around with and experience. So when we finish with deity purification and connecting to the divine, we're going to do pore breathing. Now, pore breathing purifies the 72,000 smaller channels that run from the central channel throughout all the pores of our body, into our hairs, our nails, our teeth, everything. So we have these three central channels, right? We have the central channel, and then we have the lunar and solar channels on either side of it. Now we're purifying aspirations in 72,000 very little tiny thread light channels that run all throughout our body, open up into all the pores of our skin, into our hairs, teeth, nails. We're doing this very simply. With the tongue on the roof of the mouth and maintaining your posture, you're going to visualize that you're surrounded by light. You're going to inhale light. And as you do so, you're going to try to feel that all the pores on your skin are inhaling this light, and light is entering in through the pores of your skin. And then you're going to exhale a black smoke out of the pores of your skin and send it into nature, where it gets recycled. Then inhale pure light through all the pores of your skin. Exhale smoke. You can exhale smoke out of the nostrils too. Very simple practice. You're going to do this 36 times, 36 breaths of this at your own pace. And then when you finish your 36 breaths, you're going to begin what we call the organ breathing practice. Right? Organ breathing is a practice that purifies the organs with the energy that we've accumulated from practice. And again, there's many ways to do this. Some are more precise. This is a very general, very simple way. There's two ways to do this depending on your muscle control. If you have the muscle to control your diaphragm properly and to control your pelvic floor properly, then the technically correct way to do this is as follows. You put all the fingers of the hands together, and this will be true no matter how you do it. All the fingers of the hands together, because the organs, the channels for the organs terminate at the ends, terminate into the fingers. So you put the fingers together so that these channels unite and connect. And just put your hands on your lap. Palm down, not palm up, palm down. And with the tongue on the water point, or a fire point if you're feeling sick, right? You can do the fire point for this one. You're going to inhale, and you're going to enlarge, you're going to inflate the abdomen as you inhale. Now, while you inflate the abdomen, you're going to lift the pelvic floor up by pulling the pelvic muscles up, right? These are the same muscles you would use to cut the flow of your urine if you were urinating. You're going to cut and pull these pelvic muscles up while you inflate the abdomen out. This can be quite difficult for some people who don't have good muscle control of their pelvic floor. Then you relax the pelvic floor, exhale. Retract the abdomen in just a little past the neutral resting spot of it, like you're compressing the abdomen slightly. Then inhale, inflate the abdomen, lift the pelvic floor up. Exhale, relax the pelvic floor, relax the abdomen, pull the abdomen in slightly past its natural place. Keep your attention the whole time on the space behind your navel, the space behind your belly button. This breathing motion gently lifts and expands the organs so they can get more oxygen, and then kind of lowers them and presses in on them slightly. And what this does is it creates kind of a breathing motion with the organs where they expand and contract and expand and contract, and actually gently massages the organs. This is very good for longevity. This is very old Taoist practice. There's some Taoists who do this for 12 hours a day. Very good for longevity, very good for cultivating health and internal energy. And it purifies the energies of the organs. So now we've chanted Iyao, we've purified as much as we can our connection to God. We chanted Makar Hostas, purified our connection to the lineage. Did the sun and moon breathing, purified the solar and lunar channels. Did the deity purification, so we purified the central channel. Did the pore breathing, so we purified the 72,000 subtle channels. And now we did organ breathing, so we purified the organs. And now we've kind of worked on every basic level. So when we finish, now we're going to purify the mind by sitting in silence and keeping the mind not forcefully still, keeping the mind relaxed and enjoying the silence that comes from a good meditation session, and trying to expand yourself. Here you're going to engage in dialectic a little bit, some contemplation. You're going to contemplate yourself and try to find yourself. And contemplate your own inner divinity. And you'll find after a good meditation session, it'll be like your mind is riding a wave. And so you'll find that your mind naturally begins to expand and realize some truths. So just silence your other thoughts, relax in your mind, and let your mind naturally raise and elevate itself. And enjoy that silence. Try to go deeper and deeper. And spend at least 10 minutes sitting in silence and enjoying the silence of a good practice session, and contemplating a little bit on your real nature. And then when you finish this, we usually close all of our practice sessions with the Makar Hostess prayer. Right? So you'll chant it the same way we did before, kind of singing it and ending it with the E, Ah, and the O. So now we're going to take a little 5 or 10 minute break again. Less this time, a little bit less, just 5 minutes or so. So to prepare for the empowerment, the energetic empowerment into the technique, which is when I signify that I'm giving you authority to practice this technique and the authority to make speedy progress in it. And I send you some of my energy to help connect you to the lineage. So take a short little 5 minute break or so that I can kind of prepare for that, make sure I have some of the things here that I need. And then we'll come back, we'll do the empowerment, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So, thank you all, God bless, be victorious, and we'll resume in a few moments. Okay, so sit like you're going to sit for meditation. And open the hands out like this, like you're going to receive something. And for the oath, which is very simple, just keep your hands out like this. For the transmission, you can rest your hands on your laps, but they should still be open and facing me. And during the transmission, during the actual empowerment, you should, as much as possible, keep your attention on me, on my form. If you can do it without blinking, that is better. To keep the eyes open without blinking. Connecting to me, heart to heart, visualizing a rainbow bridge of light, connecting our hearts. So you can open up to the energies of the lineage. If you need to blink, that's fine. And if there's anybody, if there are any new students for the preliminary cycle who were not able to attend this live, don't worry, energy does not operate by the same rules of time that we do, that we make ourselves do. So you'll receive this empowerment when you watch this video later, just the same as somebody would receive it watching it now. So we'll open up with Makar Hostes. Makar Hostes Yuraiman, Peletaste Aneras, Myotan Nagestue Kai, Deasue Type Sukan. Now hold your hands out. And repeat after me. I, say your name, do hereby swear to keep these practices sacred by keeping them secret and applying myself to them with honesty and dedication. I promise to keep myself accountable to myself and to my teachers. And then touch your head, touch the heart. Now rest with the hands open on the laps. Connect to me personally. If you can do it without blinking, all the better. I'm going to give a blessing, and then I'm going to send my energy to you to connect with you heart to heart. I hereby bless and authorize you to perform the practices of this lineage, which you have now been empowered to, by the full authority invested in me as the Hierophant and scholar of this lineage and of these teachings. I empower you to perform the preliminary cycle. May God bless you and the Masters bless you and guide you in your practice. I sit openly. Let's all chant together. I thank you all for attending your empowerment today, and I thank you all who are re-attending or re-attending or re-attending the empowerment just to connect to the blessings and to the lineage and to hear the instructions again. So I thank you all for your time today, and I pray that God blesses you and your practices and grants you victory and grants you a long life and good health and success in all of your endeavors. And I pray too that you keep in touch with your teachers, you keep in touch to Laysons, the teacher for the preliminary cycle. And of course, if you ever want to talk, I'm unusually busy fellow, but you can send me a message and I'll try to get to you when I can. So thank you all. God bless. Be victorious. And I hope to see you soon.